You, you aren't old enough to understand it. I know. It's a great way to start a talk that's supposed to be about empowerment. Do you feel empowered yet? But the truth is, this is a phrase that we've all heard at some point in our lives. You've all been empowered by something, and you've all been discouraged by something. And the truth is that protests and social protests have been a great change that we should all choose to take part in, especially youth protests. You see, I'm something of a self-professed news junkie. The first thing I do when I wake up is read the news, and it's the first thing I do before I go to bed, and about a dozen times in between. So I'm pretty passionate about politics. So you can imagine that when youth protests picked up and just a rise in high school interest in it occurred a few years ago, I was so excited and ready to participate, and I was glad to see our school being a large part of national movements and social movements. You see, the biggest, most prominent protest of our time is the student-led movement known as Never Again MSD, or Never Again Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Most people tend to think about this as a protest that's about gun control. I'm going to go against the general consensus and say that this is a protest about school shootings. You see, we should all be joined by this issue. We should all stand together and say, I'm opposed to school shootings, because why wouldn't we be? The issue is that people tend to take this protest and see it as, people take this protest and they see it as something that creates two opposing sides. They see it as, oh, you're on that side or that side. You are pro-gun control or anti-gun control, but really shouldn't be seen this way. But the fact that it's being handled this way has led to increasingly polarized parties. But I want to assure you, the purpose of this talk is not to push the agenda or a partisan agenda of any one group or one social movement. It's to encourage you, each and every one of you, to pick the protests and the movements that you are passionate about and go forth with those and choose to protest for them. I see it as a sign of progress that this protest culture has become such a large part of our social movements. And it demonstrates that America is willing to open up political conversations about issues that were dormant for years. 50 years ago, could we have imagined people going out on Pennsylvania Avenue and talking about LGBTQ movements, or women who have been oppressed, or sexual harassment in the workplace? Probably not. But we see that today, every day, and we should be empowered by that, and we should want to partake in that. Obviously, we have a long way to go with these things. There's so much more that we can do, and we should all choose to be active parts of our community. There seems to be this notion that youth protest is a completely new idea, but the truth is that it's caused real change throughout the past, and we can see that in multiple places. Now, my slides are a little messed up, so bear with me. Obviously, one of the most prominent, well-known American movements in history has been the civil rights protest, where youth and universities started staging sit-ins, like the Greensboro sit-in, and so many marches and petitions, where people could come together and just find that they all stood together for equality and freedom and empowerment. And it led to the integrated society we have today. Now, another very prominent movement that we might not know so much about is the Vietnam War protests. These started at small universities, and with just dozens of kids refusing to go to school, refusing to step out and go to college, in protest of a war that they didn't believe was fair. What started as a college-level protest just ballooned out, and it spanned across the nation, with people standing together and eventually even sending a 35,000-person signed petition to the president, leading to President Nixon pulling out of Vietnam. So these examples pretty prominently show that youth protest has played a large role in our society for a long time. But high school protest, maybe not so much. Most of those movements started at the college level. So this is our time. This is our time to try something new, our time to find high school protests. Obviously, it's not so easy for me to just tell you to stand up, walk out with signs and fences and everything, and go walking down the road protesting for what you believe in. There are some significant drawbacks, like social media. It's true, Twitter and all these hashtags have been extremely active in popularizing these movements over time. They wouldn't have had the outreach that they have today, and obviously all of us are getting emails, we're seeing notifications about them. But the truth is that social media can have a pretty negative effect as well. As of 2017, the Pew Research Center found that 67% of Americans primarily got their news from social media, and 74%, almost 3/4 of the 336 million Twitter users worldwide primarily got their news from that site. That's 280 characters. I wonder how much of a complete narrative you can get from that. The truth is that we need to combat this because the popular media perception of protest is that it's an us versus them issue. It's about what side of the solution you're on. But protest isn't about that. Protest is about raising awareness. It's about being aware of the social movements that are happening and knowing what it is that you believe in. I don't believe in an age limit on political views because I think that politics is just a set of morals, a set of ethics, a set of beliefs. And there's no age limit on having a moral code. But articles continue to delegitimize the arguments of the opposing side. We see this all the time in popular media and breaking news every day. I have behind me a couple examples from two of the most prominent news networks we know, Fox and CNN. Now, we all obviously know that they have certain biases within them, but I want you to look at the two headlines on each side. They're all talking about the same topics, but you can tell that there's an obvious wording bias in them. You can tell what they want you to believe. The problem is that we can't really fix this. The media is what it is. But the ultimate goal for each and every one of you should be to discern your own opinion without being lost in the haze of propaganda and careful wording. You should be able to analyze the facts and decide what it is you believe. My best suggestion to combat this is to read articles on both sides. If we can't change the way they produce the news, we must change the way we take in the news. I'm going to leave you all today with a challenge. I want each and every one of you, regardless of political affiliation, of gender, and of whatever voice you think you have, I hope you choose to be remembered as a generation and the people who stood up at the time when the world needed it the most. Thank you.